Hello everyone. In this video I will be going over our fourth exponent rule, which are negative exponents. So for this rule I am going down to the fourth row. And I'll start right in this first box here. So as I just said, the rule we are covering in this video is the negative exponents rule. Negative exponents. Okay, so the general formula that we have for negative exponents is we'll be given something, or we'll be given a base in the form x. Okay, again, this x is interchangeable with any other base that you would like to use or that you were given, to a power of negative a. Okay, so this negative a represents our negative exponent, the one we're referring to in the rule here. So when I have something that is x to the negative a, what I like to do first is I like to turn it into a fraction. So I'm going to put a 1 underneath. That's how I turn anything I would like into a fraction. I can always put a 1 underneath. So I've got x to the negative a over 1. Okay, and when we simplify that, it's going to become 1 over our same base x, but instead of negative a, we're going to have a positive a. Okay? So a rhyme I like to use to remember this is cross the line, switch the sign. Okay, nice little rhyme there that could help you remember it. So if I go back and I just take a look at this general rule of thumb here, right? X to the negative a, I crossed the fraction line, so I brought it down to the basement, and I switched the sign of my exponent. So instead of having negative a down here, I had positive a. Okay, and when you are simplifying any monomial, regardless of which rule you're using, if you have a negative exponent and you think you're done, you think you have your final answer, that is not correct. Okay. There should be no negative exponents ever in any of your answers. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. So let's say I had s to the negative 8. Okay, so first off, I know I have a negative exponent, so something's wrong here. It's not simplified. I need to make this a positive 8 somehow. So because I have a negative exponent, I know I can cross the line and switch the sign. So I'll make a line, and I'll put a 1 underneath. So I've got a fraction. I've actually got a line to cross. And from here, this s to the negative 8 is just going to come down to the basement. So our final answer here, because we took everything from the top, we need a placeholder. Placeholder is always going to be 1. And down bottom, I've got my base s, and I just need to switch the sign. So it's going to be 1 over s to the 8th power. Okay. Over here, I'm going to write and vice versa. Okay, so let's say we were given 1 over s to the negative 8th power. Let's say there's a negative sign right here. We would cross the line and switch the sign. So it would come right back up to the top, and it would become s to the positive 8 over 1. Okay? So it doesn't matter where your negative exponent is, if you're moving it from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top, either way is allowed as long as you don't have any more negative exponents. Okay? Let's take a look at our 6 example problems to hopefully make this a little bit more clear. So if I take a look at this first problem, okay, I've got 2x all over 4x to the negative 2nd power. So from our old rule, or some of the rules we've already learned, we know this is a quotient rule problem because there's a fraction bar. Okay. So here we're kind of combining a couple of our properties. We're eventually going to have to use the quotient rule, but in the meantime, let's get rid of the negative exponents. I like to try to make all my exponents positive before I actually move on with the simplifying process. Okay, so this 4 has a power of 1, and this x has a power of negative 2. Because this x has a power of negative 2, I know I can take this x to the negative second power, and I need to cross the line and switch the sign. So if I rewrite this problem, I will have 2x, which is from the top here, but I'm also going to have x to the positive second power because I crossed the line and switched the sign. All over, down here I'm left with 4 to the first power, which is just 4. Okay. At this point, I can do the quotient rule because I have all positive exponents. So let's take care of my big numbers first. I've got 2 and 4. So to simplify 2/4, I know 2 goes into both 2 and 4 evenly. So if I divide the top and bottom by 2, I get 1/2. So I know in my final answer I'm going to have a 1 upstairs and a 2 downstairs. And if I change colors here, I can take care of my x's as well. Okay, so I have x times x squared upstairs, which is the same thing as x to the first times x squared. And because I have a fraction here, I'm going to put a 1 underneath. I don't have any x's down bottom, so I need a placeholder, so I'm going to put a positive 1. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the product rule to simplify x to the first times x squared. So I know that will get me x to the 1 plus 2, still over 1. And of course, 1 plus 2 is going to be 3. So I have x to the third power over 1. Okay. At this point, I'll go up to my modified fraction up here. I have underlined everything, so I can go ahead and prepare my final answer. I'll put my fraction bar. My red fraction, I had 1 over 2. And for my blue fraction, I had x to the third power over 1. I know at this point I can multiply the top, multiply the bottom, and I should have my final answer. So 1 times x to the third is going to be x to the third. And 2 times 1 is going to be 2. So final answer is going to be x to the third all over 2. Okay, takes a little bit of getting used to, but really we're not doing a whole lot different. We've still got our power rule, we're still going to have our quotient rule, we're still going to have our product rule. The only addition are the negative exponents here, and if you take care of the negative exponents right at the start, as long as you have a solid grasp on our other exponent rules, you should be all set. Okay, I'm going to move over to number 2. So taking a look at this one here, I've got 3p, p to the negative third power. Okay, even though there aren't multiplication dots in between the 3, the p, and the p to the negative third power, I know they're all being multiplied because they're all touching. Okay, so what I'm going to do first off, so I don't get confused, is I'm going to give everything that doesn't appear to have an exponent of 1. So that would be this 3 and this first p here. Okay, from there I am going to turn this into a fraction because I have negative exponents. I know I'm going to have to cross the line, switch the sign. And this p to the negative third power is going to come downstairs and become p to the positive third power. So if I rewrite this, I've got 3p, or 3 to the first, p to the first, all over p to the positive third power. Don't forget to flip that sign. Okay, at this point, I've got a quotient rule problem. So for big numbers, I've got a big 3. So I've got big 3, and there's no numbers down bottom, so I can put a placeholder, which is 1. So I know my final answer, I'm going to have a 3 upstairs and a 1 downstairs. And for my p's, I have 1 p upstairs, 3 p's downstairs. So I know I can expand this. So I'll have p over p times p times p. And I know I can cross some stuff out here. Whatever I have up top and down bottom cancel. So I've got 1p that I can eliminate. So when I rewrite this, I was left with nothing up top, so I need my placeholder, which is going to be 1. And down below, or downstairs, I had 2p, so I'll put p to the second power. Okay. I've underlined everything in my modified fraction here, so I can go ahead and prepare my final answer. So I'll draw my line. My red fraction was 3 over 1, so I'll put a 3 upstairs and a 1 downstairs. My blue fraction was 1 over p squared, so I'll put a 1 upstairs and a p squared downstairs. Now I can multiply the top and the bottom, and I should have my final answer. So 3 times 1 is going to be 3. 1 times p squared is going to be p squared, or p to the second power. Final answer is going to be 3 over p to the second power. Okay, on to number 3. Number 3, I've got n to the first power, all to the second power. So taking a look at this problem, I have parentheses, so immediately in my mind I know I have to use the power rule, the first flag that goes off for me. So I've got no big numbers, so I don't have to add exponents to anything. I've just got one item, if you will, inside the parentheses. So I can just multiply my powers together. So I've got n to the negative 1 times 2, which is going to be n to the negative 2. Okay? But keep in mind here, I've got a negative exponent, so my work is not done yet. So I need to cross line and switch the sign. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a line. And I'm going to put a 1 down below my denominator, downstairs. So I know this n to the negative 2 needs to cross the line, switch the sign. So when I do that, I'm left with nothing upstairs, so I'm going to put a placeholder of 1. And down below, I'm going to have n to the positive second power. Final answer. Okay, over to number 4. All right, looks like I've got a lot of negative exponents here. I've got 3 of them. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add exponents to my terms that look like they don't have any exponents. So that would be this 2 up here and this 2 down here. Now before I go ahead with the quotient rule, which clearly I'm going to have to use here, I'm going to take all my negative exponents, I'm going to cross the line, switch the sign, and set up a new fraction. Okay, so I've got this a to the negative 2 and this b to the negative 2 that are going to come upstairs. And I've got this b to the negative 1 that is going to come downstairs. Okay, so if I rewrite this fraction, put my fraction bar, I have a 2 upstairs, I have an a to the second power upstairs, and now I've got a to the positive 2 and b to the positive 2. So I've got another a to the second power and a b to the second power. Okay, and downstairs I've got this 2 right here. And I've got this b to the negative 1 that was upstairs, but I crossed the line, switched the sign, so I've got b to the positive 1 downstairs. At this point, I have all positive exponents, so I can go ahead and use the quotient rule and the product rule to simplify this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take care of my big numbers. So I have 2 over 2, which I know can be simplified to 1 over 1. Now I'll go to my a's. So I've got a to the second power and a to the second power. They're touching upstairs, so I know I need to multiply them. I need to use the product rule. So I've got a to the second power times a to the second power. There are no a's downstairs, so I'm going to put a placeholder, which is going to be 1. So I know I can simplify this by adding the exponents together. Keeping my 1 down below. And 2 plus 2, of course, is 4. So for my a's, I've got a to the 4th all over 1. Almost there. Got to take care of my b's now. So for my b's, I've got b to the second power upstairs. Let me underline these, so I've got them all underlined. B to the second power over b, which is the same thing as b to the first power. So I'll go ahead and expand this. So for my top, I have b times b. And down below, I just have a b, 1b. I can cancel out a b from the top and bottom. And when I do that, I'm left with b over everything canceled down below, so I'm going to put a placeholder of 1. So now I can go ahead and set up my final answer, because I've underlined everything in my modified fraction here. So I'll draw a fraction bar. For my red fraction, I had 1 over 1. For my blue fraction, I had a to the fourth over 1. And for my orange fraction, I had b over 1. Okay, so if I multiply the top and I multiply the bottom, 1 times a to the fourth times b is going to be a to the fourth b. Just smush them together. And 1 times 1 times 1 downstairs is just going to be 1. So this is an acceptable answer. This is not incorrect, but keep in mind, whenever we are dividing by 1, our solution is going to be whatever's on top. So I'm just going to rewrite this without the 1, just as a to the fourth times b. And that would be my final answer. Okay, only a couple more left. Let's head down to number 5. Taking a look at number 5. Okay, it looks like I'm going to need the product rule here because I've got a bunch of things being multiplied. I've got no fractions, I've got no parentheses, so I'm not going to use the power rule or the quotient rule. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a fraction. I see negative exponents. I know I'm going to have to cross the line and switch the sign. So this x to the negative third power, that's going to come downstairs. Let me put my placeholder of 1 here. This x to the negative 4 and this y to the negative 1, they are also both going to come downstairs. So if I rewrite this fraction, I'm going to have y to the fourth times 2, because this 2 has a power of 1, over x to the now positive 3 times x to the positive 4 and y to the positive 1. Okay? So now I turn this into a quotient rule problem. So I can go ahead and solve this as if it were just a quotient rule problem with no negative exponents. So I'll start with my big numbers. So for my big numbers, I've got a 2 upstairs, and I've got a 1 downstairs. Okay, and remember I put that 1 downstairs because it appears that I don't have a number downstairs and I need something for the top and the bottom. 2 over 1 can't be simplified, so we're just going to leave it like that. We know in our final answer we're going to have a 2 upstairs. Next, I will take care of my, let's do my y's. I've got y to the fourth upstairs and y to the first downstairs. So y to the fourth over y. So I'll expand. This would be a good time to point out too that exponent problems like this, when you're simplifying, the way I teach it might be a little bit different from the way Mr. Chaponis teaches it or Mr. Jakes teaches it, and that's okay. There are different ways to solving these problems. As long as you're doing it correctly in an organized fashion, I will support whichever way you like to solve these. Okay, I actually recommend, if the way I'm teaching it, if this is something that is confusing you or you feel like it's not your cup of tea, I hope you seek out another math teacher to see how they teach it, because I know they're, even though we all end up with the same answers as math teachers, there are different ways of getting that solution. So go have a chat with someone else if this isn't making sense to you or you feel like it could be making more sense, and I'm sure they would be happy to help you. So if we take a look at our y's here, I'm going to have 1 cancel out in the top and the bottom. I'm left with 3 upstairs. And I'm left with nothing downstairs, so that's the same thing as having just a 1. And now I'll take care of my x's, and then I should be ready to write my final answer. So I've got x to the third times x to the fourth, but here's where some people are going to make an error. They're just going to put x to the third times x to the fourth. Okay? Remember, we have a top and bottom here. There were no x's up top, so I'm going to put a placeholder of 1. And all in the basement, I'm going to have my x to the third times x to the fourth. So I know when I simplify that, I've still got a 1 upstairs. And down below, I've got x to the 3 plus 4, which is going to be 1 over x to the 7th. Okay, in my modified fraction, I've organized everything. So I'm going to go ahead and write my final answer. So I'll make a big line. My red fraction, I had 2 over 1. For my blue fraction, I had y to the third over 1. And for my orange fraction, I had 1 over x to the 7th. So now I can multiply the top and bottom, get my final answer. So upstairs, 2 times y to the third times 1 is going to be 2y to the third. And down bottom, I've got 1 times x to the 7th, which is going to be x to the 7th. And this will be my final answer. Okay? All right, on to our last one. Then I'll stop talking for the day, I promise. Okay, so immediately when I look at this one, I've got x times y to the negative first, all to the power of 4. I see parentheses, I know I'm going to have to use the power rule. So before I do the power rule, I'm going to give everything inside my parentheses an exponent. This y already has an exponent of negative 1, so I'm going to give this x an exponent of positive 1. Okay? So now I know I can multiply my exponents or powers on the inside by the power on the outside. So when I do that, I'll have x to the 1 times 4, y to the negative 1 times 4. Okay, and if I continue on, I'll multiply those exponents. So 1 times 4 is 4, and negative 1 times 4 is going to be negative 4. So at this point, I've done the power rule. I've completed that process, but I have a negative exponent, so I'm not technically done yet. So I know I'm going to have to cross the line and switch the sign, so I better create a line. Put my placeholder of 1 down below. And this y to the negative 4, I know is going to become y to the positive 4 downstairs. So if I write my final answer, I was left with x to the 4th upstairs. That didn't move at all. And downstairs, I've got y to the positive 4. And that would be our final answer. At this point, you should be ready for some practice. If you want to go back through and watch some of these examples in slow-mo, pause your screen, feel free to do so. As usual, just let me know if you need any help, if you need any extra practice, and I would be more than happy to help you. Have a great day, everyone.